Hello there, this is Dominic Carroll at Hargreaves Lansdown. I'm one of the financial wellbeing specialists here, and as it's Scam Awareness Month, we're bringing to you a couple of webinars covering scam awareness and a few things to look out for. You'll be glad to hear it takes about 20 minutes or so. There's time to ask questions at the end, so if you do have any queries, please do let us know. We'll also be highlighting a few different ways that you can get more information and protect yourself from scams in future. In terms of what we'll cover, firstly, we'll have a look at common financial scams, so everyone's on the same page regarding what we need to be alert for. We'll have a look at what happens if you are scammed, because often it can be more than just cash that you're losing. And then lastly, as I've said, we'll have a look at how you protect yourself. The webinar itself is information as opposed to financial advice, which means I can tell you a few things to look out for, but I can't give you advice in terms of what would be best in your particular circumstances. If you do want financial advice, that is something that can be provided separately. So to kick things off, I've got a few statistics here for you. Unfortunately, not very positive. The £82,000 figure you can see there is the average amount lost to pension scams per victim in 2018. And that's according to the FCA and pensions regulator. In 2017, it was about 91,000, so it's the same kind of ballpark figure. Now, it takes on average 22 years for an individual to save up a pension pot of £82,000. But many savers could lose a pot like this within a 24-hour time frame, as it's actually indicated that 1 in 4 of the people who were surveyed as part of this report admitting taking less than a day to decide on a pension offer, which means they've been approached and within 24 hours they've decided that that's the right thing to do. The reality is it's quite a sizable amount of money in most cases. When you're talking about a pension, it's often your life savings. So it's really important that you take your time to consider any offer that comes your way and to do the due diligence and research around that. But it's not just pensions that could be affected by scammers. In 2018, £197 million is reported to be lost to investment scams. And the most common scams reported involved investments, shares, bonds, foreign exchange, and actually cryptocurrencies as well. There's been a real spike over the last couple of years in that. These actually accounted for about 85% of all suspected investment scams reported that year. So 54% of those who checked the FCA warning list, which some of you may have visited before, actually said they were contacted via online sources, which is up from 45% in 2017. So the internet, we know how powerful that is, and actually it's a tool that can really be used by scammers to get to people who may have cash they're looking to get their hands on. So it is worth treading carefully online and protecting yourself to the most common financial scams. That's what we'll come on to now. We'll just run through a few. Some of them you might be aware of, some of them are fairly new. We'll just talk in a bit more detail. One of the main ones that we concern ourselves with and try and kind of warn our clients about, being a pension and investment company, is pension liberation. And this is essentially the promise of an early access to your pension. Now, currently you can access your pension schemes from age 55, and that's rising to 57 in 2028. To the best of my knowledge, the only way you can access that before age 55 or 57, as it's soon to be, is in the case of terminal ill health. So if you do have terminal ill health, you would receive a letter from your doctor, contact your pensions provider. If you have less than a year to live, often you can access that whole pension pot. So that's one way of accessing it before the allocated age. If you're being promised by a pension provider who's approached you out of the blue, saying that you can get hold of it, essentially scammers prey on people who are under financial strain. So the coronavirus pandemic has left a lot of people in difficult financial situations. Scammers know that because of this financial pressure, people are more susceptible to believing and then taking the bait, if you like, due to the perceived possibility that their financial troubles will be alleviated. So you can see that if people are promised they can access their fund earlier, if you are in a difficult situation, you're more likely to want to believe that. It can be described as borrowing money from a pension fund, where it involves transferring your fund to an unregulated scheme. Some of the scammers often call it a pension loan. But essentially, if you're accessing your pension using one of these methods before age 55, you would be subject to a tax charge of at least 55%, which could actually climb as high as 70%. So it's a massive amount of tax to be paying if you do kind of take that option of trying to access things early. Strongly consider whether it's in your long-term interest, because if you're losing 70% of your pension pot, that's going to have such a huge impact on the lifestyle you could actually live in retirement. And by moving to an unregulated scheme, there's no guarantee that you'll actually get any of that cash back. Another common one that we see is unsolicited pension reviews, where you're contacted by someone cold calling, often offering something like free advice. And what they'll try and do is get as much information as they can about your pension arrangements, where everything's held, and all the ins and outs of your financial situation. They then may provide advice to move into something like a really high-risk scheme, typically asking you to invest in overseas property, forestry, storage units, care homes, or really unfamiliar businesses, something that seems a bit kind of out there. Usually it should set a few alarm bells ringing. Now, typically the schemes that they would have you transfer to or invest in are not regulated by the FCA, which means that the FSCS, the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, wouldn't apply. So if something does happen there and then the investments kind of go south, then there's no way of protecting yourself using the scheme offered by the FCA. So fraudsters tend to cold call investors, offering them worthless or overpriced or even non-existent shares with these pension reviews, or they may actually impersonate real companies. They're the two factors to look out for. We had the pension freedoms in 2015, which provided a lot more flexibility when accessing your pension after age 55. Again, this is something that scammers are aware of. They're aware of the possibility of people having large sums of money that they feel they can now get at. So to combat the rise in scams, the government has banned cold calling, although as you'd imagine, that doesn't really stop scammers from going out and cold calling if that's their chosen method. So they do still persist to cold call. But what this does mean, with the government banning cold calling, it should set alarm bells ringing if you do receive a call out of the blue from someone who's saying they're a financial advisor or a pension or investment company, because just straight away, they shouldn't be doing that. And that probably means that they're not obeying all the rules that are set out by the FCA and the government as well. Another one, again, online, something that's quite prevalent, actually affects a few younger people. The younger generation tend to be a bit more subject to this, is social media scams, where scammers will advertise on social media. They'll advertise kind of a portal that you can invest in, or fake investment accounts that, when you're looking online, show major profit. But actually, when you do proceed and click on their adverts and so on and set up an account, the fees tend to be astronomical. They take quite a lot of cash from you there. There could be charges to make a withdrawal, and actually it could be unregulated. So again, if they close down as a company, there's no protection there to ensure that you get some kind of compensation if that happens. So we've got a stat here that 356 reports of losses via Instagram in 5 months to March 2019. And Instagram is mainly kind of pictures and so on, and a bit of advertising on there, but it is a tool that can be used by scammers. So it just shows that it's not just through certain websites. They can try and get to you from many different avenues. So it's always worth being aware and vigilant to the different risks that are out there. Actually, victims in their 20s lose on average £8,900 to social media scams when they are scammed. So you can see it's not small sums of money that we're losing here. If you are in your 20s, I mean, you might be saving for a house, car, whatever it is that you're saving for. If you lose £9,000, that's going to knock you back somewhat. So again, always worth being vigilant. One that I think a lot of us will be aware of, if you have an email address, which I imagine is pretty much everybody these days, is phishing scams. You also now have, with scammers kind of adjusting to the way people operate, you also have phishing and smishing, which is phishing over text. As you know, it's an SMS, is a text message, and phishing is phishing over the phone. Essentially what this is they send an email out to you, trying to get you to click on a link, which will take you to a certain website, where they try and get you to input personal information. We've got an example of a phishing email here, where it's, "Dear whoever, we've examined your PAYE return for 2015-16, blah, blah, blah." But you can see we've hovered over the PAYE link that they've put in here, and it's taking you to a website which doesn't look legitimate there. It's not a HMRC one. It's not from the government. So essentially they're posing as the government there. You can see the address along the bottom, saying they're based in Westminster. Everything here is geared towards getting you to click on a link, taking you through to a website where they hope that you input some information which they could then essentially steal from you. And you should always check that a link is going to a legitimate website before clicking on it. And if in doubt, navigate to the site another way. So if you think this is actually from HMRC, instead of clicking through the link, go to the HMRC website on a separate browser without clicking through the link, and then see there if there's any messages for you, if there's any kind of correspondence or information through your accounts that you have with HMRC or whoever it is that you've received the email from. Similarly, the sender's email address may give you a clue as to who's really behind the email. hmrc.me.uk, that doesn't seem as a legitimate there. So again, it's always worth being vigilant to those things. So recently, the UK's National Cyber Security Centre has released a kind of pioneering, in a way, suspicious email reporting service to make it easier to report and flag suspect phishing emails. If you do receive an email like this, as I have before, you kind of think, well, how can I report this and make sure that the person who's sending these, that someone is out there kind of tracking them down. Individuals can forward suspicious emails to report@phishing.gov.uk. Then, of course, delete that email, make sure it's not in your inbox anymore. Including those that are COVID-19 related, they can always be sent to report@phishing.gov.uk. This has been a very successful outing, I suppose, that's offered by the government. It really has helped people feel a bit more secure, because now you're able to report the emails that you receive, and it's one way of helping to combat the effect that phishing can have. I will put up the email address towards the end shortly, so don't worry if you haven't got that down. I'll put that up for you to view shortly. Another one that you might receive, and more often than not tends to be from PayPal, again, because it's a payments company. They're trying to get you to input the details. So yeah, we've emailed you a little while ago to ask for help resolving an issue on your PayPal account. Your account is still temporarily limited because we haven't heard from you. You can see there's pressure here to try and get you to click on the links to log in through the site and input any details that they require. Again, if you receive something like this, there's nothing stopping you going directly to the PayPal account and checking that everything's okay there, rather than clicking on a link. With recent events ongoing, we thought it'd be worthwhile to highlight a few other scams that are taking place, not necessarily to do with your finances as such, but scammers, it just shows how quickly they can adapt to situation and how people might feel under strain under the current environment. So they have actually capitalized quite effectively on the impact of COVID-19. So Action Fraud indicated that between the 1st of February and the 18th of March 2020, nearly £970,000 was lost through coronavirus-related fraud. In this regard, we've seen quite a clear evolution of fraud in the UK since the coronavirus outbreak. As the pandemic was starting to spread and people in the UK were panic buying, fraud was largely focused on e-commerce. So fraudsters offering things like fake hand sanitizers, fake PPE, so fake masks and protective equipment. In some cases, they, rather than kind of providing inadequate materials, inadequate products, they just took the money and ran. So people were at one point very desperate to get their hands on things that would keep them and their families safe, or companies as well, if they were buying them, they were susceptible to scams as well, where they're time pressured, so they try and get hold of these products, but they're willing to go through a company they might not have heard of and may not be the most secure, and actually it turns out to be a scam. There's no products provided, and actually they lose quite a bit of money from that. As the situation evolved, so did the methods from scammers. As the government announced the furlough measures that are still in place currently, and also tax rebate mechanisms, the campaign of phishing and smishing took hold. The purpose of these exercises is to obtain personal and sensitive information and plant viruses or malware on people's devices that can then be used against them. So just like the emails that we've just looked at, instead they had a bit of a different tilt on them. They were using coronavirus and preying on people's fears in that regard to kind of make some, or steal some money from people, or information as well, not necessarily just cash. There's further evolution as well, where the focus now appears to be on scams which are taking a number of forms. The ones of most concern are ones whereby investment firms are being cloned, transfers to non-standard investments or safe havens, if you like, to protect them from market volatility, including pension transfer scams. So a slight evolution of the typical pension liberation scheme, where instead they're saying, well, the markets are in turmoil and kind of painting a picture in that light and saying we have a product which is usually very low risk or and high return. They put those two terms together. The reality is there's no such thing as something that's low risk and really high return. They're opposites. If you're looking at something with high return, you can bet there's a high level of risk associated with that. So that's one thing to look out for, is if they're promising you something that's too good to be true, then as the old adage goes, it probably is. So what happens if you are scammed? So first of all, it could be that you lose cash, especially if you translate it to an unregulated scheme where the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, it's out of its remit to be able to assist you there. And really it's not an ideal scenario to be in, because there's not much else you can do to get that cash back. It's not just your cash that scammers are after, it's also your personal data. So we've actually got quite a useful kind of graphic here from Experian, which shows us the value of different pieces of personal data. Now, it is looking at America, but as I say, it's pretty much the same for the UK. Things like your national insurance number, online login details, credit or debit card information, driver's license, the passport. You can see there $1,000 to $2,000 is what someone would pay for, a scammer would pay for on the black market for that. Once you fall victim to a scam, you can expect a lot of further contact, as you're marked as a potentially easy target. And your information can be sold on to other scammers and data thieves. So there have been examples where someone's been scammed once and then they receive many, many more unsolicited emails and calls because you're seen as an easy target. So it is worthwhile always being vigilant and making sure that you protect your personal data as best you can. Now, unfortunately, anyone can be a victim of a scam. However, the research carried out by HSBC in 2019 indicates that nice people are 10% more likely to get scammed. Now, it's not nice to hear that, because it's nice to be nice, but the reality is that if you're more friendly, kind, and cooperative, and are more willing to please, these are the qualities that fraudsters love, because they will try and put pressure on you to kind of act quickly. And if you're someone who tends to be nice and kind of easygoing in that sense, you might be more kind of keen to oblige and try and help someone out. So do always try and be alert and skeptical, and don't allow yourself to be pressured into making a decision. If someone's trying to make you rush into doing something, just take a step back and take that time to have a look at things. There are plenty of ways that you can protect yourself. So if you are being approached by somebody and they're making you rush, then we've got a few different ways that you can protect yourself and a few different avenues that you can go down to ensure that you're making the right decisions. Now, firstly, you should ignore unsolicited phone calls, texts, or emails. If they're out of the blue, you can always query where they've got your information and just make sure that you're not being pressured to do anything. As we said earlier on, beware guaranteed returns. If someone says, I can guarantee you X amount, which tends to be quite a high figure, they don't go hand in hand. A guaranteed return it's very unlikely to be a high return. Use advisors and firms that are regulated by the FCA. So we've already said that if you receive a unsolicited call from someone saying they're a financial advisor, you already know that the government have made it illegal for pension companies and investment companies to cold call. So that should set alarm bells ringing. If you're approaching a financial advisor yourself, you may want to check the firm reference number. The FCA have a whole register where you can pop in the details of the advisor and the firm and just make sure that they're registered with the FCA. The FCA warning list that we mentioned right at the start of the webinar as well is something that you can log in online. If you're being approached, whichever method you're being approached by, you can input the details online, and the FCA warning list will indicate whether you need to be vigilant or if that's a legitimate contact that you've received. A few other bits of information. The FCA Scam Smart is a website which can help you spot a scam. It highlights what to look out for. So you can select the time, the type of contact that you've had, and it will tell you what to consider and could indicate if the perceived opportunity is a scam or not. It also has quite an interesting quiz to see if you could spot a pension scam, so it's a safe environment to see how that would work. Worthwhile checking that out just to arm yourself with a bit more information and to familiarise yourself with what to look out for. Now, Action Fraud is the UK's national reporting centre for fraud and cybercrime. So we mentioned earlier on there was an email address to send that to. It's just along the bottom of the page there, report@phishing.gov.uk. Citizens Advice, of course, has a whole range of assistance for reporting scams, checking for for scams and also emotional support if you have been affected by scams previously. Age UK also have another kind of website that you can access to look out for, to understand what to look out for and further support. So all in all, very similar in terms of how these different websites operate in terms of them providing you with more information. Do make use of any bits of information that you can to arm yourself and make sure that whenever you're receiving contact, it should set alarm bells ringing if you've done the research around what to look out for. And with the email address, the report@phishing.gov.uk, I would just highlight that you should then delete the email that you've received from the scammer, the potential scammer, once you've sent it to report@phishing.gov.uk. One other place I would draw your attention to is the HL Security Centre. So through our website, you can access the Security Centre, which provides a lot more information about how safe your investments are with Hargreaves Lansdown, how you can go about protecting yourself further, and also threats to be aware of. There is also the ability to report suspicious activity. So you're not fighting them alone. If you do have any suspicious activity, rather than just think, oh God, I'm being a bit of a target here, you can start reporting this and things can get done about it. There's also a list of frequently asked questions and also contact details if you need any further assistance through the Hargreaves Lansdown website. So, as I said, it's a fairly short webinar, just telling you the things to look out for. Some of it might have been quite familiar to you. Hopefully there's been at least one or two things that you've been able to take away from today's webinar. You may want to have a look at protecting yourself further, so make sure that all of your login details and so on are very secure. If you are receiving emails, remember to report those emails to the Action Fraud email address that we've popped up, because that can make all the difference if we start fighting back against the scammers. Now, I would say please do take a few minutes or so just to read through the important investment notes. There's not too many to read through at the moment. Please take a minute or so, and then we'll have time to run through any of the questions that you've popped in the Q&A section there. Okay, so thank you everybody for attending. We will be sending out an email with a link to a recording of this webinar. So if there's anything that you want to go over again, then you should receive that email shortly after today's webinar. We will now have time to go through a few questions. If you don't want to stick around for the questions, then feel free to leave. If you've got what you need, then that's perfect. But of course, if you do have any questions in future, we're always on hand to provide you with any information that may be of use. But we'll make a start with the questions now.